I'll preface this by saying I'm going to play a line on the trombone. This is a Duke Ellington song, one of my favorites, called In a Sentimental Mood. I'm going to play the very first line. Here's a very basic demonstration of what happens in my head. This is a line that's going to go up, and everybody can hear. Most people, I would say 90% of people are going to be able to hear a line that can go from bottom to top like this. I went from the low register of the trombone up to the high register. So the difference with me is if I hear that, I'm picturing an actual line in certain spaces, and I'm picturing an actual like kind of grid as that goes up. When that last note hits the very top, I'm picturing a line straight across with no wavering, and then a drop off on it. So that and this line is very similar to the art that I'm showing here. The show is entitled Synesthesia, and the synesthesia is a condition of one or more of your senses mixing with one or more of your other senses in a quote-unquote unusual way. A perfect example of that is there are certain people who associate colors with numbers. They can associate maybe numbers with taste. We all know people that have maybe associations with days of the week. Certain days of the week have certain personalities. There's a very, very common, I shouldn't say common, but fairly common synesthesia condition where people see color when they hear music. And that's a perfect example of that is Kandinsky, the artist Kandinsky. He wrote many books about it. My condition is that I see shapes when I hear music. So when people come to see my artwork, they'll see how those shapes kind of become alive with the music that I'm listening to while I'm creating the art. There are two types of art here at the Cultural Center of mine. There is something I call Mindscapes, and those are very much there's a style in art called automatism. They're very surrealistic. It's basically you put your pen or brush to the canvas or paper, and whatever comes out, comes out. It's very, very much like doodling on the phone. When you're on the phone and you look down after a half-hour conversation, you have an entire piece of art, good or bad or indifferent, and that is automatism. It just comes out your hand, and that's how my art is created. I look at the art in this show, which is it's just beautiful in the show with the lighting and everything, and I say, wow, when did I do that? So that's a fun thing for me. So that's the first style of art that's here on canvas and on paper. The second type of art that I have here are large composer portraits. The composer portraits are mostly of classical composers and jazz musicians and composers. Those are my favorite styles of music, so it kind of, I made that native to me. The composer portraits involve synesthesia as well, but the original intent of me doing composer portraits was to bring to light these composers that I love and make them larger than life. So these are very, very large portraits, mostly 6 feet tall by 3 feet wide, and those are done in pen and ink. If anyone listening can imagine taking a ballpoint pen, which is not what I use, but just as an example, a ballpoint pen to a large piece of paper and filling that in with ink lines, much in the way that my mindscapes are created, in a spontaneous kind of flow, but actual faces come through in those portraits.
Talk about the colors that you chose and the palettes and kind of that wash that we see behind some of those big canvases.
The color is simply the vibe that I'm feeling, and that's the best word I can find, or the aura of that particular composer. If I see any color at all with music, it has to do with that, the essence of the composer. There's another example there, which is Philip Glass, who's a very famous contemporary composer, and directly across from him in the gallery is a piece, the brand new piece that I have called Prophecies, which is an amazing piece of music by Philip Glass. And I did that painting around that piece of music. The color on a canvas or the drawing is actually the vibe, or what I would say is the essence of the composer or the music itself. The second part to this is that I have a technique called weathering the canvas, which for me is a lot of fun. I prepare a canvas with acrylic paint, many layers of acrylic paint, and then, us being in New England weather, I put the canvas out with, no harm to the environment, by the way. I put it out with a giant plastic cloth, and I leave that on a picnic table, clamped to a picnic table, for about 3 weeks, and I get to see the changes in the color and the texture on the canvas, and that makes it very interesting for me. I've said before that it's as fun as watching paint dry, but for me, it's a lot of fun. I start at the top left-hand corner, and I just let my hand go, and what comes out, comes out. What I do is start with a very, very basic shape on the canvas or the paper, meaning I'll do the outline of the face in very light pencil, or a basic, let's say, square and circle on the canvas. And then from there, I fill all that in, and that's how that works. So it's just top left to bottom right, and the only reason for that is so it won't smudge. So those forms, by the way, they're very musical to me. The straight edge, most of the work is done in, especially the later work is done in brush, not pen. And the artists out there will definitely appreciate that. A very fine brush. And most of it is related to the music that I'm listening to. So those kind of straight edge, jagged lines are something that's going on in the music, like the Beethoven portrait. It's a perfect example of that. There's a lot of jagged lines. I was listening to Beethoven's Second Symphony during that. And then when the lines kind of smooth out, it's the second movement of Beethoven's Second Symphony. So the music totally relates, like completely relates to what's coming out on the canvas.
When and how did you find out you had synesthesia?
So this has been happening to me since I was a little kid. What I say in my talks is, when you're 7 years old, you don't ask anybody else what the music was in their head when they had measles. But it's always been there, and I always assumed, stupidly, very naively, I always assumed everybody had that going on. It's like, oh yeah, when you get sick, you hear music in your head. And I was told that wasn't the case. So at that point, it wasn't termed synesthesia. The second part of that is when I was producing a record back in the 90s, I turned to and this is a story I always tell. I turned to the engineer and I said, can we make those blocks of sound more square? And he said, you must have synesthesia. And I had no idea what that meant. So that led me down a whole path of discovering what synesthesia was. And it kind of allowed me the license to explore it more, especially in the artwork.
Do you think that synesthesia has a lot to do with increasing your awareness of the world around you?
That's what I think it 100% is. I feel my exhibitions, and this one especially, because of the room and the architecture of the room and the lighting of this room, which is just amazing to me. I'm an architecture fanatic. The pieces work so well here because you can combine all those senses with the paintings and the colors and the structures within the painting. If people could come here and be aware of the musical influences, they would kind of get that. And I always encourage in my talks that people try to get off of the one sense that they're used to and try to taste the music or try to see the music. Like, what would this piece of music look like?
So there are lots of opportunities for people to go see art throughout New England. Why come to this exhibition now? Why is it relevant even to the moment in time that we are all going through and coming out of?
My feeling about this moment coming out of the pandemic in this last year, even though my art hasn't changed much, but it did make me aware of how these senses were crossing and how important it was. So I feel that being nimble relates to improvisation. And I would say 99% of the work that's here is based on improvisation and the synesthesia that I have. And these pieces that are in this space are very, very nimble. if you think about how life can go, like we dealt with the pandemic almost literally overnight. This thing slammed us. So for me, to have that flexibility in life for the unexpected is very, very important. And I use my art for a complete metaphor of that. Like, we always have to be on our toes. We're in constant automatism every single minute of every day. Anything can happen. So I feel that the value of this exhibit in this space speaks directly to what we've been through, as far as you have this amazing structure of the building, and within this structure with my art, it's improvised. So, like, to me, it's a perfect metaphor for how to live life.
This idea of this interdisciplinary, multisensory functionality as humans, there's not really a way forward in true creativity without it.
I agree completely. And I think what we're getting in trouble with is we're just getting more and more in this little bubble where we're not experiencing every sense that we possibly can. Like, nature gave us these 5 or more amazing senses to really milk life. And where are we going? We're going the opposite way. We're getting more and more in the heads of our phone and our computer. So I agree that this is the time we should all be tapping into all our senses at the same time. I want everybody to get in there. I want them to hear some music. I want them to feel it. I want them to, what's the texture of that particular section? Why are those lines jagged? Why are they morphing into a smoother line? Why are they morphing? Why is that line morphing into a circle? So I want people to come here and imagine the music that was going on while the paintings were created.
Anything else?
I think that's it.